Tēnā koutou katoa, and hello to you all. I'm Adam Emirali. Look, AI is a hot topic at the moment. You can't escape it. It's everywhere you look, and in my opinion, for good reason. It's been around for decades, but since the launch of ChatGPT-3 a few years ago, that triggered a wave of interest and investment that has meant that the generative AI tools that we have today have exploded in popularity and capability, and that's why everyone is talking about it. In just a few short years, I've experienced firsthand the evolution from ChatGPT-3, which was a purely text-based model that required really complex prompting. And then you fast forward 2 years to today, now we have Claude Code, for example, where a total novice like myself can code games and web applications from thin air. And you don't need to know anything about coding to do that. And recently, just in the last few days, you've seen the launch of ChatGPT-5, and that enables a complete novice to automate and autonomously do really complex tasks like researching a topic and then developing a PowerPoint presentation based on its findings, all from one single prompt. So this is where we're at, and it's pretty incredible. But what I will say is that there are still tricks to go beyond just the generic answers that some of you will have experienced. Well, all of us will have experienced at some point. We already have a huge amount of questions that have come through, so we're going to tackle those quickfire style in the Q&A. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll be back really soon to answer those questions. And I'm back. I hope you enjoyed that. Now we're going to jump into the Q&A. So as I said up top, we've got tons of questions to get through, so we're going to go quite quickly. Some of our questions include things like the climate impacts of using AI, managing bias, and how to deal with sensitive information, so hang about. So we're going to, as I said, some quick fire questions that were submitted before the session. So question here from Kerry. Tips for creating your own AI bots. So for no-code options, which I use, I recommend using N8N, so that's the letter N, number 8, and then N. A quick hack for using N8N to create your agents. If you actually use Claude Code to design your agents, you can then ask Claude Code to generate the JSON code that you can then upload into N8N, and it will automatically populate all the modules for you. So, and don't forget to put in your API keys into N8N. So that's a quick one there. Next one is from Alex, who asks about voice and personalization. So for voice, I prefer to use 11 Labs and connect it with a custom GPT or Copilot Studio. So you can even clone your own voice, which I have done and did some silly things with, just because it's funny. The main watch out here is that 11 Labs is scarily good at creating a voice, so you can literally do text to voice. And so this actually, the explosion of these voice models actually is leading to a lot of harm in the community, particularly around scams, because the voice is really good, and you actually only need like 3 to 5 minutes of audio. So you know, watch out those people with YouTube and those sorts of things. So just a little kind of word of warning there. John asks, how do I write an AI policy? We actually have a template, and we've run a previous webinar on how to write an AI policy for your organization. The team will drop a link in the chat, or we'll fire that out afterwards to you, John, and obviously anyone else who's interested. If your needs are more complex than that, then obviously the crew here are happy to kind of have a chat and help you out. Hugh, H-U-W, I hope I said that right, Hugh. He asks how to ensure AI confers with brand. So I imagine that's like brand, tone of voice, that sort of thing. So most organisations will have a writing style guide. I know that, for example, the New Zealand government has a writing guide. So what I recommend is you actually take that guide and you edit it, I should say, for use in AI, and then you can either train your custom GPT or add it, if you're using Claude, add it to project knowledge, and then that will make sure that it kind of fits your writing style that you're looking for. Another quick tip, if you are using Claude, Claude has a feature around that is writing styles. So if you're looking at the chat window, there's like a little settings thing. So you click on there and you can set up your own writing styles. That's really cool if you've got like a range of different stakeholders or audience groups that you're trying to talk to, then you can set up different kind of writing styles. So that's a good one there. Natalie, sorry, I know we're going really fast. I'm trying to make sure we get through as many questions as possible. If you do have some, pop them in the chat. Happy to take live ones. So Natalie asks, is AI all it appears to be? In 10 years, are we going to be talking about it, or will it just be the norm? So for me, AI isn't hype. So right now, it's possible to entirely automate, really, tasks that humans would have done. So, we obviously gave you that kind of bank call center type example. And that is especially true as the speed and ability of these models grows. So what I would say is we're not going to go back now. These things are going to continue to progress in capability. So I think that's why I say adoption is kind of not optional for knowledge workers. So it's great that you're attending this session. Hopefully you got a bunch of tips out of that. The main thing is to kind of start using AI to augment your work or your personal life, depending on your kind of personal policy, your kind of personal data protection and privacy needs in your personal life. And then obviously for your organisation, you need to make sure that you're adhering to your organisation's policies. And again, if you don't have an AI policy, check out the template. That'll be useful to get you started. Michelle asks how to deal with sensitive information and security and private, how secure or private is AI? So thanks, that's a good question, Michelle. And the answer to that question really depends on your setup. And by that I mean your kind of organization setup. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of run through some quick scenarios here, starting from government all the way down to kind of individual users. And give you some kind of tips or thoughts. So at a government level, the large providers actually create kind of custom versions of their models for governments. So for example, OpenAI have GovGPT, and Copilot, Microsoft Copilot also have versions for government level adoption. So, these will be ring-fenced, they'll run on cloud computing, and will be run in a kind of data sovereignty kind of way. So, from a government perspective, that's what's kind of being set up. Most large organisations use a closed network approach, so they'll have models running on their own network, on their own servers, normally kind of on-premise. And again, just like the Gov options, those provide the maximum level of security and data sovereignty, but obviously are expensive, and hence why governments and large organisations are able to kind of have that investment. And Diana kind of asks about the bank example that we gave earlier around, how secure would your personal information be if your kind of bank adopted that sort of technology? And the answer, Diana, is that they would be using a closed network AI solution. So your data is, theoretically, as secure as it is right now if they weren't using AI. In fact, you could probably argue it's more secure because they don't, at the moment a human is accessing your personal information. Theoretically, that human could memorize that information, whereas you can build an AI agent that obviously wouldn't be doing that. For smaller organisations, so we're going down the list here. So for smaller organisations, there are still good options available. So Copilot is one of the better ones for smaller organisations, mainly because most smaller organisations are running on Microsoft products, so SharePoint and OneDrive. Likewise, Gemini, if you're using Google Suite, Gemini is also really good. So those offer kind of enterprise level, if you like, security and things like that. So whilst the data sovereignty issue won't necessarily be solved by those solutions, the privacy and security aspect can certainly be significantly improved. And then as we get down to kind of individual users, the best you can do really is to make sure that you're using a paid tier of one of the models, and that where you can, you turn model training off. So for example, just a quick example, if you're using ChatGPT, a paid tier of ChatGPT, you can jump into settings and you can just flick the toggle on model training. That doesn't make it perfect, but it certainly improves your kind of privacy and security. And lastly, if you're on a free tier, my advice is to really restrict what you're putting in and what you're using it for. The free tiers are really great if you just want to have a little play around and get a little bit of experience. But what I would say is the free tiers exist to kind of obviously pull you into a paid tier, but also because the providers use all of that data in their training. So you are a data source for them in that instance. So for the prices are generally kind of $20-ish a month for all the various models. So my kind of advice to most people is, if you can afford the $20 a month, it really is worth the investment. And we've got a couple of live questions come through, so thanks for those. So Bev asks, as an average reader stroke operator, how would you tell what is a hallucination or an error? That's a good question, Bev. I would, what would I say? So I would liken a hallucination in AI to a mate of yours who's seriously confident about an answer in a pub quiz, and so it's kind of like a vibe thing. You'll get the vibe that they are really super confident, and perhaps there's some oddly specific things that they've got in there that you think, oh, that feels a bit wrong, and then under interrogation, obviously the facts around it start to get a bit kind of vague. So that's precisely what happens when you spot a hallucination, or you feel like the model is hallucinating. So a few things you can do to kind of speed up the process. You can actually verify using a different model. So for example, if you're using Copilot, then if you used Claude to check something that maybe like a paragraph or something like that, even the free tier, a paragraph or something like that you thought, oh, that reference doesn't feel right, or that number doesn't seem right, then because they're trained on different data sets, it's reasonably likely that the other model will fail to find a source for it. So that's one little trick. Another trick is to ask the model that you're using that hallucinated or that you suspect has hallucinated to provide you the specific source. And you can actually ask it to give you inline links for all its sources. And that is a really quick way for you to kind of click through and check that, one, does the link actually take you anywhere? Because that's obviously a dead giveaway that it's hallucinated if there's no direct source. And two, if it's like numbers and things like that, then obviously you can actually quickly search that web page yourself to find the location of the quote. So those are a couple of kind of quick tips. Sorry, I will just add that as the models are getting better, the hallucination rate is declining. So the recent launch of ChatGPT-5 has cut the hallucination rate versus GPT-4 by about 90%. So the models are getting better and better at removing hallucinations from their responses. That's a really great question. Thanks, Bev. So we've got another question here from Hannah. So how do we best mitigate bias that is embedded in AI? And that's a really good question, Hannah. All the models are trained on the internet, basically the whole internet plus a bunch of other data, but bias obviously exists in that training data set, but also in the way that the models are trained themselves. So each model will have different biases. I would imagine, so you can you can reduce bias at the model training stage. But I'm going to assume, Hannah, that you're not talking about spending tens of millions of dollars training your own model. Let's assume that you're using existing models, and the question is kind of how do I reduce the bias that's built into these existing models? So let's tackle it from that angle. What I would say is, if you think about our triangle that we spoke about earlier in the session, if you follow those principles, you can choose, for example, you can choose a model that has a lower level of bias built into it. You can do things with your prompts and your contextual data. And then obviously you as the human will review and refine. I'll just touch on probably the couple of things that, aside from you as the human detecting or checking for bias, the other two main things that you can do is around model selection and contextual data. So we'll just go through that really quickly. So you can choose the right model for your task. For example, I would choose a model that reports on its bias and safety. So Anthropic's Claude is generally the best at reporting on these things. And what that enables you to do is really look at, okay, what is Anthropic saying are Claude's biases, and then that way you can kind of be aware of them as the human in that refined stage to watch out for those biases. Similar to that, there are independent benchmarks. So Stanford have one called Helm. So you can obviously check that for models that have been checked against Helm. And there's another one which is AI 360. So you can use those. And then the last option, I think, around choosing models is you can actually choose smaller models that have been specifically trained for a task, and that helps reduce the bias. So we mentioned earlier that Elicit being one of the products that we use for research, that's kind of been fine-tuned for that specific task. So they release bias information on that, and so you can see that it's less bias than using a kind of large LLM, but it still contains bias. And by reading the research and the information packs, you're able to kind of detect it yourself as a human. I'm going on a bit here, sorry. And then the last thing that I'll touch on is contextual data. So if you actually provide it your own contextual data that you know that you have curated, so you know it's kind of devoid of bias, then you can help kind of post-train, if you like, in a way, the model to reduce its existing biases. So a quick tip on practically how do you actually do that. So let's say I've got 10 documents that are about, or research documents that are about a certain topic. I know that they're unbiased. Rather than just adding them to my first chat, what you actually want to do is you want to make sure that the kind of model for that task is referencing those documents every time. So to do that in ChatGPT, you'll need to use a custom GPT. They're quite simple to set up. So and you can upload those documents into there. Again, organization, AI policy, etc., etc. And in Claude, you can add them to your project knowledge. And then in Copilot, you can actually reference specific folders of files that are on your SharePoint or OneDrive. I'll stop there because I've gone on a bit, but if you've got more, you want to know more about that, happy to chat about it. Maybe we can run a specific session or something like that. If you'd like us to do that, maybe just chuck a comment in the chat and we'll send out an invite. Next question is from Damien, who's looking for the best tool for qual research purposes. So as we said in the session, we use Elicit for lit and assisted synthesis. Just a quick warning on that, it really sucks at generating the reference tables, so you will still have to do that yourself. So I say that as a warning because we've learned that through practice. For analysis, we are still using NVivo. We're yet to find something that we have enough confidence in, and so, but however, watch this space. There's a couple of things that we're looking at the moment to take over some of that. And lastly, I've heard people using Dovetail for collection and organisation. We're yet to, or I'm yet to see that in action. But I've heard good things about Dovetail, so check that one out. A live question here. Atta asks, I get, what does that say? I get emailed the same questions a lot. Could I create a bot that responded to my emails based on previous emails I have sent? The answer to that is absolutely. You can. If you're using Gmail, for example, then it still works in Outlook, to be fair. Then I would recommend using N8N for that purpose. You can literally load your kind of previous questions in there, so that as long as the question was kind of roughly around, or the email was roughly around those questions, it would fire across to your chosen AI model. And then that model would generate a response, send it back to Gmail, and then fire out the email. So that sort of thing is actually fairly straightforward to do. Watch back my previous answer on how to use N8N for that little trick there, but that's what I would do, is use N8N for that task. Natalia asks, best AI tool for creating brand graphics. Oh, that is a good one. The Adobe, I've forgotten the name of the Adobe product. That is actually pretty good and getting better all the time. It can be challenging to prompt. So actually what I would do in that instance is I'd use our tip from earlier, is I would use a ChatGPT or a Claude or something like that to actually help me generate the prompts to create the images that I want. That's my kind of main tip. It is a little bit tricky. the products are still kind of at the earlier stages for image gen. So, you will have seen ChatGPT's image gen kind of blow up massively because now you can put text and stuff in images. So they're still kind of, they're catching up, I would say. So a good question here from Natalie. Is it ethical to use AI when it uses so much energy contributing to climate change and water scarcity? So that is a very common conversation that I have with people. Not so much about the ethics, but about the climate impact of AI use. And I don't feel like I could talk about the ethics of using AI. To me, it's kind of like debating the ethics of driving a petrol car versus an electric car, and so it's kind of up to each individual's kind of code of ethics, if you like. But let's definitely have touch on it very briefly about the climate impact to kind of put the climate impact into perspective. So MIT did a study, I think it was late last year, not long, excuse me, not long after the launch of ChatGPT 4. They did a study and basically worked out how much energy, in the US at least, how much energy a prompt, a normal ChatGPT prompt, used, energy and water. And then they compared it to other things that we do on a daily basis. And essentially what they found was that you'd need to do 100-ish. Of course, there's a bunch of variables around, okay, how complex is your prompt, how long did it take to process, those sorts of things. But it's around about 100-ish ChatGPT 4 queries is the equivalent to a 1-hour Zoom or Teams meeting. So if you think about it in that context, then you can kind of moderate your use accordingly. So yeah, I mean, most of the technology that we use nowadays requires a data center. All data centers require energy and water. So it's just about your kind of individual mix of usage. Of course, it's cumulative, absolutely. But if as is, Zoom and Teams meetings are also cumulative. So, I think we all need to do what we can to fight climate change. So one thing that you can actually do is not as an individual, unfortunately, but as an organization, you can actually select data centers that run on renewables, for example. So there are ways to kind of mitigate or reduce the climate impact of your AI use. I hope that's helpful, Natalie. Lauren asks, there are so many tools available and things are changing so fast. What's the easiest way to stay on top of these developments? Cool. So 3 tips for you there. You can create your own newsletter generator in ChatGPT. I have one myself, and so I'm happy to kind of share the setup so other people can copy that. It just runs a daily ChatGPT task and generates me a newsletter of things that I'm likely to be interested in. So that's one option. Another option is sign up to something like the Rundown AI. That again is like a daily newsletter. It is American, so just be aware. But it does give you kind of useful updates and that sort of stuff. And then if you're more of like a YouTube or podcast person, then I often recommend AI for Humans. It is silly, but the silliness kind of helps make it much more approachable, and they do like silly experiments and things like that. So so check that out if you're interested. Michelle asks, how do I rate Copilot? Good question, Michelle. So a couple of things I would say about Copilot. So Copilot itself actually uses ChatGPT. So I believe that they've just integrated ChatGPT 5, so it is running on like the latest and greatest model. So from a actual product, from a model standpoint, I should say, it's actually leading or market leading amongst the top. I think where Copilot becomes difficult, and this will be no surprise to anybody that uses Microsoft products, the user interface of Copilot is more complex than your ChatGPT or your Claudes or indeed even Gemini, just because of the way that Microsoft has designed it. So whereas you can kind of jump between Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, Grok, etc., because they're all kind of set up in the same user experience, kind of user interface way, Copilot is kind of unique, let's say, on its own. And so it does take a bit of getting used to. I think once you're used to it, so things like I mentioned before, where, you know, in Claude you would drag and drop kind of files into your project knowledge. In Copilot you can't do that. Instead, you've got to reference the specific folders in SharePoint that you want it to access. So from a user experience point of view, it is more clunky. It takes a bit more getting used to. But I think from an organization perspective, it does provide more security at the moment than the other products, which is why many organizations are using it. The other reason that many organizations are using it is they're already built on Microsoft infrastructure, which means, you know, all your IP, internal data is already in the Microsoft ecosystem, and that actually makes Copilot work better once it's kind of trained on your internal data. I shouldn't say trained. It's not trained on your internal data once it has access to your internal data. Right, that's us, I think. I've probably gone on long enough and definitely rattled through that quite quickly. But if you, again, if you want to catch up, I love chatting AI. Also happy to have 10 coffees in a day. So if you do want to catch up, just whack the button on the screen. Ngā mihi nui, thank you very much for joining. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one. See you later.